Hello, everyone. This is Madiha Ahmed, Indian Social Development Expert at Madiha Ahmed OPC Private Limited. And this is part two of the video that I did on the topic Sociolinguistics and Sociology of Language. Now, in the first video, I covered a lot of things more along the lines of sociolinguistics. But today, my focus is again going to be more on sociolinguistics, but in also close connection to sociology of language. Now, here, society is a bigger focus as compared to language. And what I'm going to discuss and share about is who speaks what language and to whom, right? So, and also like language change, how it occurs in different groups. Now, where did this understanding come from? So, as I was growing up, I grew up in a household where my mother tongue was Gujarati, and the environment which I grew up in, where second language was Hindi, first language was English, third language was Bengali, and of course, and also interacting with different groups of people, and always being an extrovert. It always gave me that excitement to connect with more people, right, of different cultures and communities and languages, which is why my interest in different learner types and different language speakers really increased. So today in this video, I'm going to share about the use of language in social life. So when we think of that's one of the things I'll be discussing. Where let's understand, how is language used in our social life. Now, one of the most important things is, yes, of course, when children are small, as parents, adults, we might emphasize that the reason language is important, or the use of language is important to be understood, is number one, to do well at school, and academic is the entire focus. Therefore, marks can be important. Secondly, the ability to participate in elocution, debate, the mock United Nation, or all the different things that can happen, speeches, and all of those, right? So, what happens here is the motivation is more to just excel in academics and to come out as a successful individual from school. However, when it comes to the academics, and when we speak of children excelling in language to be able to do well at school, there are different challenges that I see children facing. Number one, the behavior. So let's say that a child is an introvert versus a child who's an extrovert. Different kinds of challenges can happen. So, for example, there may be children who like literature, who like reading, who like to discuss ideas, but they may not prefer a very big group, or a larger audience. They might just want a small audience for themselves, right? On the other hand, another factor that plays a role here is that children feel that if they have to learn a language, writing is the most important thing, and therefore they may feel lazy to write, either because the content is not very engaging, or secondly, they struggle with understanding how to put it down. The basic thought structure, the way to structure your thoughts is missing, because of which children may not take an interest in the way language is taught at school, be it second language, first language, or third language, either of them. So, also for many children, they speak a certain language at home, and that could be like not English, but at school, English is the priority. So, a child may not know how to express, communicate, think, or write in that language. Uh, Chances are the child may not know that, and may not have that much of fluency and proficiency in the mother tongue also. But the point here is that the child struggles to even understand why should I use this language, why should I learn how to use this language. And also grammar, that's something they feel, oh god, there are so many things to remember, rules to remember, or to be grammatically correct, and therefore they even fail to try further. So what I do in my experience, from teaching children and adults, I let children first, over a period of time, open up about at least the thoughts. The confidence should come that even if they cannot speak in English, with a certain idea, they can start using some words, give them some words to give them some kind of support, so that the child is at least able to figure out how to at least share something. Once the child develops that ability to express even the little bit, the child will want to further explore and build their expertise and their proficiency in that language further, especially with oral. With written, what happens is, when even I was a student, and I usually enjoyed writing essays. Like in school, I remember till class 12, I loved English language and literature, and even Hindi language and literature. And the reason I was good in those languages and doing well even academically, as well as studying science, which was like less of a language, more of understanding concepts and being able to apply. I was good at all of that because I figured out that I was wanting to express more and more. And to me, it was more important to express. And therefore, the more confidence I was getting by expressing, even if in the beginning, for some years, my language was a problem. Grammatically, it was going wrong. But that thing, I didn't stop myself from expressing. I still wanted to express. And therefore, that confidence gave me the ability to try out new variations and new forms of expression. So, if we are speaking of academics, and academically, if we want to drive children to be successful and encourage them to learn skills and learn language, written or oral, it's going to be a huge challenge. So that is why, the sociolinguistics and sociology of language became important in my field and in my work, because I figured out that how do we, very, very consciously, mindfully connect society and language, what children are observing, what they are going through, and then bring it into the curriculum in a way that they feel excited to express, to think. Because today, at this age, when they are young, if they are groomed and trained and taught how to start using their mind to come up with the different forms of expression, different exposure experiences they get to be able to explore certain topics and think about different topics, that'll give them the confidence to explore the world around and not be restricted. Also, if there are many situations where I've seen individuals who otherwise love communicating, who love interacting with other people, they suddenly take a backseat in life. They stop communicating, talking too much, because they feel that they're going to be judged in the way they talk, or they're not going to be accepted by the larger circle of society, all of that. So what is very important here to remember and keep in mind is this, that when we are speaking of the usage of language in the social life, it should be, and it has to be more focused on the ability to connect and communicate, rather than being grammatically correct. Because many a times, like for example, there are so many different platforms I've seen where oral communication is taught, and they have to we have a certain body language and a certain posture, and certain way of talking and a structure, and there is so much of rigidity that is there, because of which I've seen children who come to me and they've come from such platforms. I see them kind of very, very not they're not natural, they're not themselves. I can see there they have to put on a show to be talking. They know they have a talent, and this is about, mind you, children who are intelligent, strong, confident extroverts. They have the ability to express what they want, but there is an additional whole baggage that they carry with themselves to be able to talk. So for me, and in my style of communication, it's okay to have the where you stop all of a sudden, or stammer, or repeat certain words. It's okay, as long as it's natural. It is going to connect with people. It is going to be like a very natural conversation that somebody is having with somebody else, right? Rather than something that is faked and pretended. And nobody those things are already available on that is where writing comes in. So if I was to think about language in social life, there are two aspects to it. There is a written part and there is an oral part, right? When I speak of the written part, there I feel being grammatically correct is very important, because it gets very confusing, because there's no sound coming, there is no body language associated, there are no additional factors to support you, to give you more meaning and interpretations of the same. Therefore, as much as possible, if written language is grammatically correct and accurate, it just makes the interpretation, communication easier. However, when it comes to, now again, written, by written I mean, even if you're talking on WhatsApp, or communicating on some device, or some Zoom or WhatsApp or SMS or Facebook Messenger, whatever it is, comments, what I'm trying to say is, there again, two things. So let's take up an example. When we think of Facebook, somebody who writes a post has to be like accurate with language as much as possible, has to be very clear about it. And people who comment can be a little like not grammatically correct, or they could be talking in a very, very like a language which is their own, mixture of two languages also. However, So here what has happened, the written language is divided into two parts: the main post, which has to be if possible as accurate and grammatically correct as possible. The comments can be, to converse further. Now, here what happens is, that is like a social media example that I gave. However, when it comes to, let's say, Instagram, chatting with people in personal life, daily life, it is not possible to be grammatically correct all the time, because you're going to be struggling to always be right. See, even if you are a person who is fluent in a certain language, very it's very difficult to be like professional and accurate and grammatically correct speaking to someone, because you start developing your own comfort zone, right? To be able to talk to someone in a language that you both are comfortable with, be it with your children, be it with your spouse, be it with your friends. It's okay to go, break the rules then, because that is what it's all about, right? To be able to communicate and express in different forms and connect at more levels. Now, when we speak of the oral language, there again, there is one part where you're just having a conversation. So typically, if I was to hear a child who's coming to my class speaking to their family members or their friends, it would vary as compared to how the child would talk to me in a class, right? That situation is going to be totally different. And that's totally fine. You know why? Because this context is different, the social context is different, the situation is different. And therefore, it requires the child to be able to customize. Of course, the respect element for a teacher, but at the same time, I like to be the teacher where children kind of open up and share instead of feeling scared and too disciplined in that environment. The discipline should come out of respect rather than being forced and scolded and carrying a personality which children are scared of, right? So oral language, as I said, is again two types, where you're talking normally with people, and there again it doesn't matter about the grammar and all the other things, but what matters is to be able to communicate and be very 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 natural. The same child can go up to a stage and be very fluent and give like a very perfect grammatically correct speech. So if I was to think of myself, typically if I'm having a conversation, I would be using a lot of Hindi words, or I would be using like um, more of these, very common words and very natural language that I would speak. That's how I would think about it. But yes, if I'm doing a video or if I'm giving a talk, I have to be a little more structured. Having said that, I think the reason people do this, be it in friendships or in relationships, like relationship either with your parents, your friends, or between spouses and in-laws. So here again, when we speak of language in relation to society and society in relation to language, many a times we've seen the kind of language that a person uses in their own parents' house versus in the in-laws' house, it undergoes a big change, as compared to a person who is like, let's say, having their own company and the language they use versus them being employed in another company and the kind of language they would use. All of these variations that I saw gave me insights into how that language differs from different social contexts and according to what kind of society you live in. Again, the kind of company that you work for, the kind of profession that you have, all of that influences how you speak and what you speak and who you speak to, how, right? The reason all of this happens is two reasons are there. One is the desire to have a sense of belonging and to be accepted. So acceptance and belonging are the two important reasons why people, modify and, try to customize themselves. By the way, here the word customize is not the same as I used it in the sense of how I explained the 5-step theory of how language leads to social development in terms with respect to the mind and soul of an individual. That connection is not the same. Here, I specifically mean according to different social contexts and not subject expertise or fields, right? So here when we speak of language variation, how does language vary, right? When it comes to society and the kind of how we speak and how who we speak to and in different social contexts and situations. Now, it happens one because of geography. So let's say if an Indian is in India and the person talking here, their way of talking, their language, their style is going to be very different from that person settling abroad in US or UK or Australia or New Zealand. And again, from each of these countries, the language, accent, style is going to vary a lot. And at the same time, the language variation. So typically, that same person, if they come to India, they might be open to joking and cracking jokes and using a certain language, a certain style, but they may not be comfortable doing that over there in their own the new country where they are staying and they've moved to. So what happens here is, or they start adopting the accent which is there, the style which is there. Now, this is like, to again, to have a sense of belonging, to feel accepted, that yes, I have come to your country, but I have now got adjusted with you. That is why, so many of my friends, professional friends who I speak to, if they are from a different geography, even if they were from India but now settled elsewhere, their accent undergoes a change. One, because yes, they are used to, that environment, hearing that style, accent, and vocabulary. But second, also to start, if until they start speaking like them or using words like the people they're surrounded by, it is likely that they won't be able to connect. They will not be accepted the same way they would be if they use that language. So there are different reasons for it, and no point in judging right here when we are speaking from a conceptual aspect of this topic. Also culturally, so a lot of times, the kind of culture that people come from. So being in India, always like growing up in a like an environment where like when I go to my hometown versus when I am in my city and I'm interacting with people versus my relatives who speak Gujarati in another Western country, the way I have seen how people of the same culture, Gujarati, varies from the Gujaratis as us who are living in Calcutta and the way we speak versus the Gujaratis who are there in Gujarat and when I'm visiting there, and how, a whole different world exists and environment exists, and everything undergoes a shift when I am there and I'm around those people. I pick up the local accent as well at times. And the same Gujaratis who've, added a like an English accent to the Gujarati when they are abroad. So what happens is the same Gujarati culture undergoes a huge shift when it is in that particular state versus in that particular village versus the city of Gujarat versus, the Gujarati staying like me in a different state, and also picking up the culture of the state as well as the mother tongue of my own hometown. At the same time, imagine, a person who's moved abroad and then they have to pick up more languages and the way they connect with it. So again, so much of variety, and therefore the again, all these shifts happen because of course, the habit which forms, and of course the acceptance and the belonging aspect of it. Now, when we speak of work, typically, I felt this when I saw different people in my family across different parts of the world, what kind of professions they were in and the way they use language, the kind of people they were exposed to, and how their language varied and their style varied and their expression and confidence and their further, progress and development, how it went about, how they went about it. So here again, depending on, now if you were to look at the global picture, we're talking of white collar jobs and blue collar jobs, right? We're speaking of the kinds of jobs which are like kind of looked down upon, and then those which require, like they're respected a lot. So again, the whole assumption, the whole uh, assumption that people have there itself. So if you were talking to someone who is like in a prestigious job, chances are you will, straighten up, use be on your best behavior, talk in the most politest of ways, and use proper language, as compared to if you were talking to someone who was not from a very prestigious job, even if they were richer, even if they were doing well. But the kind of job, I think, determines how exactly, people are using the language and in what kinds of context, and at the same time, the different the social classes that exist here, that comes in. So imagine a person, people doing the same kind of job, but somebody climbing up the ladder, somebody below the ladder, or trying to climb the ladder. So a lot of different variations happen, and therefore, the kind of language that people start using, this typical case we usually find in the Indian context, where because there are joint families and there are bigger families and relatives, and I mean neighbors and friends are so important. I see a different kind of a trend here. What do I see here? I see here that how relatives who are like of different. So here, like it's not about the family name itself which determines what kind of a job or a work they're going to do, a profession that they're going to be in. It's not necessary. Imagine, there's a big, family which is there spread all across the world, and different people in different professions with different educational qualifications, with different income groups. There, this thing dominates a lot, where in the same kind of family, where something is common, the blood relations are there. so much of change is there. Where somebody who is richer in that particular family in some part of the world, they may be looked upon differently and treated differently, and they treat everybody differently as compared to someone who's climbing the ladder, as compared to someone who's lower in the ladder. So imagine the variations that take place within the same family itself. Then imagine how much of variation might exist in other setups, outside of the family. Also, the traditions and customs, many a times, the kind of tradition or culture that is practiced at home, that the child sees and is exposed to, sometimes, like, if they're out and with their parents, and if they're talking to their parents in that language and in that style, they become very conscious suddenly if the teacher comes, or suddenly, like, a stranger comes and starts talking, that antenna goes high, and you want to not show, that side of you, because it's like not something you're totally proud of. But yeah, I mean, you're okay with it. On the other hand, in spite of all of this, there is this thing which I'm going to speak about shortly, which is loyalty to language and loyalty of language, and how people think that, if they belong to a certain ethnic group or a certain culture or community, like, for example, different parts of the world, different communities could be given, looked upon as the prime and the premium kind of a community, right? And therefore, so even, like, I'll give you an example, like, certain, I'll take an example of the Muslim community itself, and how, depending on which part of India they're residing in, plus whether it's rural or urban, versus, what culture they belong to, all of that is like so many different criteria, plus religious beliefs that they hold within the Muslim community. So I mean, so much of variation exists, and that is why the way each group teaches, the way it deals with the other group, interacts with the other group, treats the other group, undergoes a lot of change. And that is something I've seen, and I've been like totally like confused about. And at the same time, it gives me insight because I've been exposed to so much of it, that how much of variation exists, and how much of, the way somebody, like, doesn't talk to somebody of a certain community, because, it's either like you don't hold the same religious belief, even if they are all Muslims at the end of the day, or, because they belong to a rural area versus a city, urban area. So all of this, and also qualifications and the work, so educational qualifications, where they are studying versus where they are working, all of that are like so many added filters to the way, interactions happen between different societies and groups. um, the other thing is the factors. What are those factors? So I've already touched upon those briefly, but now I would like to specifically talk about those factors. So one of the things is the mother tongue. I think, when we speak of mother tongue, so I, as I said, I grew up in a family where my mother tongue is Gujarati, my dad is also Gujarati. So I mean, everybody speaks Gujarati at home, compared to if I was to look at, other friends, or some of the friends that I have, and they are like having an intercultural marriage, where two different individuals from two different groups are married, and then the children that are growing up have like more language at home. They sometimes even speak the mother's language and sometimes the father's language. So, and they know both very well, because they, I mean, mother and father have encouraged them to speak both languages. And of course, when they go to grandparents' houses, they're again exposed to more languages. What happens here is that when we speak of the mother tongue, there is this kind of thing that, okay, my mother tongue is this, so I am, this person, and I also have this in my blood. So that kind of, pride starts coming in some way, or loyalty starts coming towards the mother language and the mother tongue. And therefore, it that plays a huge role. At times you do not want to communicate or be close to someone or trust someone who is beyond, I mean, not having the same mother tongue. So I mean, that again, either a superiority inferiority complex can come in, or differences can come in, and you do not want to be, like, in close association in any other capacity as well. Second is, monolingual, bilingual, and multilingual. So now again, when we speak of different groups of people, it could be that, here again, when we speak of a group, like as in a family, where everybody is monolingual, bilingual, or multilingual, as compared to where certain individuals are mono, bi, or multilingual. Now, this can be, for example, like spouses again, example. Let's say the mother comes from a different cultural background, the father comes from a different cultural background, they both were maybe bilingual or multilingual or monolingual. The child who is born, the offspring, has more languages, so naturally the child is high chances of the child being multilingual. Now what happens here is, here, as I said, the adults who are there, the mother and the father, could be multilingual from because of exposure with neighbors, friends, or hobby or professional life, as compared to the child who has become multilingual from home and always exposed to that environment, from home, right? So here what happens is, if a child growing up from home is multilingual, the child will observe society and all the other things in society in different ways as compared to how these individuals who are mother and father from one culture who came from one culture, and they speak either, as I said, they're either monolingual, bilingual, or multilingual. If they are bi or multilingual, it could be because, as I said, because of the neighbors who are there, or the friends who are there, or the profession which gave them that opportunity to interact with more people, and therefore gave them that multilingual ability to connect with more people. So what happens here is, this is like a good situation if we were to think of it intellectually, or in terms of socially, as in such individuals who grow up in intercultural, cross cultural homes. I think the children who are born grow up with like more open mindedness. Their language is more like strong, and also their ability to connect with people is higher, because they've grown up in different cultures, they've seen different cultures right from the time they are born, right? So what happens here is, here the children, of course, as I said, they have the ability to click better with people. But on the other hand, those other people, of course, relatives, other people could be like judgmental. They may have trouble interpreting certain words, because the child has picked up so many languages, so many words, so much of vocabulary by just listening to parents and grandparents on both sides. Now what happens here is, when we speak of sociolinguistics and sociology of language, if such a case happens where the child, the progeny, is a product of the intercultural marriage, chances are that this child is going to have higher chances of good leadership, higher chances of doing better at business, higher chances of having leadership right from the start, and being able to enrich their soul in more ways, because they have picked up the ability to interpret human beings in different scenarios and situations. But at the same time, when we speak of it, they could also be individuals who, if not given the right kind of support from parents, from adults early on, they're likely to be more confused, because they wouldn't know so many different human beings popping up right everywhere, and everybody having different behavioral patterns. So here upbringing and parent support and role plays a huge role. Also, how grandparents on two different cultural sides, how they support the child, and make it easier for the child to pick up the languages, as well as grow in that language, as well as respect the other language that is not theirs and belonging to the mother or the father, depending on who it is. So if it is the father's side, then respecting the mother's side. If it is the mother's side, respecting the father's side, right? Now, also profession wise, the work you do, the people you surround yourself with, be it the employees or the employers or the colleagues, everybody adds to who you are and how your language gets framed. And whether you like it or not, it is going to happen, which is why, on one hand, there is this idea that, okay, I need to have a job which pays well, but also the kind of culture, the work culture that is there, the kind of people who work here, all of that becomes important. And that was important to my family when I started thinking of work, which is why I started, becoming more and more conscious. It's not to say that, okay, I'm discriminating or I'm filtering or I'm too judgmental. It's not that. It's a lot of other things, and therefore the parents are so protective of children in this situation when it comes to work, or who they marry, or where they marry, and where they get promoted. All of that affects and concerns the parents, which is why, all these reasons. And of course, the social circle that you have, so beyond your study, beyond your work, a lot of times, since I mentioned study, people move children, parents move children from one institute to another, or they prefer a certain institute because they want their children to get a certain kind of environment that is familiar to them, like home, which is safe, dignified, or they may want to give a better environment than they are having, and therefore wanting the child to get more enriched and growing better. when we speak of language again here, social circles that I was mentioning, a lot of times either people belong to a social circle and therefore, they pick up certain habits and certain language and vocabulary, or they do not belong to a certain social circle. They have the desire to go up there. So they will do a lot of different things which may come naturally to them or not come naturally to them, but they want to reach that particular goal that they've set for themselves. And therefore, to reach that goal, many a times they lose themselves, their identity to reach there, which gets very complicated because the language which is coming inside, which you've grown up with, doesn't click with the language that is around, or vice versa. You've grown up in a language, thinking a language and seeing the language where everything is fake, where everything is not natural, where everything is not authentic. But you start, your goal becomes reaching towards the tribe of people and the culture and the group where authenticity becomes a priority. So here an individual has to make a lot of adjustments within, and especially if two environments are totally different, which one which is close to you and one which you aspire to reach, there it becomes a conflict because a person doesn't know if they'll fit and belong and be accepted in both places, because this is where they want to reach, but till they have not reached there, they have to fit with this particular group and align with it in every way, even if it doesn't click with them. So that kind of confusion, is very normal. But yes, as we understand our own mind, how our mind works, things, processes, and I will be covering all of that in the future videos, we'll understand, how that affects the way a person is able to deal with life and come out successful in that particular journey. It's not about completely dealing with it, but of course also strategies vary from person to person, and the strategy that you adopt first versus what you adopt next and the order that you take up might vary, but that's completely fine. It's important that you understand where you are at this point to go to the next point. What is the next best solution for you, and that is the solution you must take. Keeping language in mind, as compared in relation to society, of course, when it comes to society and the interaction that happens within a group or between different groups, it is very important to understand that there is something called content, that is the message. Second, the way that message, that content, that information is organized, how it is expressed, versus the choice of language, especially in terms of in cases of bilinguals and multilinguals. And then, of course, the social context. Where am I, and who is around me? Who am I speaking to? Right? All of this plays a huge role in either determining, how successful you are going to be in the path that you have taken, or how quickly you'll reach up the ladder if that is your goal, or how successful you'll be in either your personal or professional space. So I'll give you an example here again, because see, I live in a country where it's all about intercultural interactions all the time, personal, professional life, and therefore it's so important to understand. See, it is easy to say that, oh, you know what, I am totally my natural self all the time. It is not so. Either you're going to go a step ahead to impress people, or show that you are capable, either in social media, in personal interaction, which is like kind of dangerous, because beyond a certain point, even if you feel that you can trust a person, you can be yourself, but at the same time, chances are you are not being yourself, and therefore there is an additional added luggage and internal thing which is weighing you, which is like a weight in you, and that'll weigh you down in different moments and add unnecessary luggage. And I do not like unnecessary luggage, so I like to let go of that luggage, unnecessary luggage, and live, and live freely. So this is what I understood, that when we speak of, so I'll go step by step. When we speak of language, the content and the message, what happens here is, always remember that it's important to communicate better and express better than use the better language, right? Of course, you have to be courteous. There's no way I'm saying don't be courteous and be very raw. But raw also means that it's not about, being rude, impolite, using foul language. No, that is not my point. My point is that it's important to use ethical language, to be polite, to be kind, to be genuine, to be honest, but at the same time, to actually convey the message instead of beating about the bush, right? That's one. Second, the content and the message, though we say that is the priority, but most people in this world are struggling to express what they are thinking to the world. They may think something else, they will tell something else, which is why even after we like a talk, we clap for it, we give it a thumbs up, but at the end of the day, there's nothing we are, even if we are just hearing, We're just thinking. We are not processing things. It's not going beyond. It's not changing the world in spite of all the good talks that happen. So, what I have learned from the good speakers that I look up to, that I respect, are people who may not necessarily have the best of grammatically correct language, but they may be people who really know how to convey their message across even in broken language, right? Because that is where the connection comes. On the other hand, there are also individuals that have come across, who speak perfectly correct grammar and also convey the message perfectly. But there are also categories where, yeah, message is conveyed, it is perfect grammar, but that authenticity inside is not reflecting outside. I still see some kind of a, kind of difference in and out, that just shows up. I don't know how, but I kind of feel it at times in certain individuals and speakers, right? So the content that I would like to share is that, if you're struggling with how to express what you're thinking, it's important that you approach experts. Because if you are at a school, a school leadership or leadership at a company, it's important for you to learn how to express yourself better. Sociolinguists and the people who know about sociology of language, because if you do not express yourself better, at some point you're going to lose out on very important people in the company or at school who are helping you out in your mission of spreading education. On the other hand, when it comes to relationship, I think it's equally important to undergo a training in wherein you learn about how to communicate yourself better and express yourself better to your spouse, to your family, to your relations. Because if you cannot do that, trust me, you're going to have very bad experience in a house, and you're going to be very, very miserable in life, right? So that is there. Second, the way the organization of that content. So you figured out, all right, somehow you figured out what is it that you want to express. If you've been able to figure out, great. I will tell about that a little later. If you're not able to figure out, it's a good idea to show that confusion in small doses and let the other person know that you need help to interpret. You need their understanding a little more, or go to an expert, seek help of someone who understands you to help you frame it better, and then go to that person and interpret it, and then share it and express it. So that saves you a lot of trouble and agony and pain and misery. On the other hand, if you have figured out how to convey the content and the message across to someone, it is for any purpose, be it work or personal relationships, it is important, how we organize it. So as I said, there has to be an element of respect and some kind of politeness and manners. But at the same time, there has to be a realness, there has to be a rawness, there has to be a authentic, transparent communication that has to happen, which is where you're going to win over the love, trust, and care of people at the end of the day, and stand out credible, because you don't have to fake it to make it. You're just doing what it is, and then at the end of the day, with all that struggle of trying to make it, you make it, not fake it till you make it, right? The third thing is the choice of language. So for me, I'll give you an example. Many a times, when I'm delivering talks, and when I have delivered talks in the past, uh, in most situations when I'm physically present in front of a large audience, I prefer doing in the mixed language of English and Hindi, English and Gujarati, Hindi and Gujarati, or only Hindi or only Gujarati. Even if it is, like I had that kind of a problem when I was doing it in Gujarati, because the kind of Gujarati I speak at home versus the one that I hear people speaking in professional circles, it's a little different. And therefore, I was a little conscious that will I be able to effectively communicate and convey it across. But I did at some point, right? And I just overcame that barrier and comfort zone, and that gave me more confidence in the future sessions when I interacted with more people. My language kind of always fluctuated between the Gujarati I was speaking at home as compared to the Gujarati that I was speaking with the professional circles. So that's one. And of course, choice of language, as I said, I would have preferred Hindi or Gujarati, because I know that even if the people here know English, chances are, A, they will know English and they will just admire, appreciate, acknowledge, and applaud. But at the end of the day, they may not be able to accept the message as it is, let it go deeper, because maybe the language that they're thinking in and most used to is that language which is Hindi or Gujarati or Bengali, in different cases, right? So that's very important. And if I'm an influencer, I'm a leader, I should be talking in the language that they speak, and not be worried about my branding at that point, that okay, what are people going to say, that I'm not delivering in good accent and good English and speaking the language people are speaking. But there the message is more important, and of course, mix it up with a little bit of the English, so that the people or the children learn new words, right, in that language also. Another thing is, to, let's say, the choice of language. Supposing I go with English in some cases, for example, when we are dealing with children, it's okay to use more of a language that they are not speaking at home, because we have to teach them that language, because that language is important to them academically. At the same time, when it comes to professional trainings, but at the same time, it's a good idea to break the ice in between by using the language that the audience is comfortable with. So choice of language should be a to convey the message effectively. You should be able to use the style and the, so problem, if you remember from the video which I shared, and the 5 steps, do check it out if you've not, where the language of the problem has to be similar. If you're able to connect at that level, it becomes easier to go further and solve problems, address problems, and get the trust of people and trust people at the same time. When it comes to the social context, it becomes very important. Where am I? So if a person is in a big gathering where it's like, all the prestigious people and respectable people are going to be there, chances are a person is going to put on extra effort in the way they dress up, or in the way they are going to be, talking, the kind of, company they're going to carry. So for example, I've seen this especially in the context of couples, where in different situations I've seen the husband is going, but they don't tag their wife along, or they are not too proud of taking their wife along. It could be because, marriage was more of a very compulsory thing for them, so they got married to what came in front of them, and it didn't matter to them whether they wanted to have a choice or not have a choice. Secondly, so they're not very proud of the person they've, like, connected with in marriage. They may say that, but they may not have that confidence. Secondly, they have the person of choice, but that was more on superficial levels than internal levels, which is why it may not be easy to take your wife or husband along. Mostly it's the wife in most scenarios in India, but having said that, there could be exceptions where the wife may not feel confident to take the husband along in certain scenarios, because of the background of the husband or background of the wife in different situations, right? uh, it may not necessarily be that, it's about, one being superior, one being inferior. The one being superior might not take the inferior along, or the inferior may not take the superior along, because of trouble or brewing, or somebody being too vocal and loud spoken. So see, these are variations that happen in this country, and therefore I'm bringing up in this topic when I'm bringing social context. Also, and where I've seen cases where the couple have a very good relationship, it's because the reasons why they've chosen each other, or they've got into a marriage, is because they feel that, okay, they can connect at multiple levels with this person, and they're ready to open up further with this person, and very proudly showing the world that, yes, this is the person I have chosen for my life and to grow with. So see, that is where, even if that has not happened, so for those of you, let's say, who are married, who've already, had like 20, 30 years of marriage, it's not about quitting on this person right now. Maybe, things didn't work out the way you wanted long back, but now is the time to fix it at your end, and to become, to put in that effort, to invest in that manner with energy, time, and effort and training, so that that confidence comes in. And in case you have children who are not married, it's important that you extend that support, and you don't repeat history, and you are more mindful with the child, and encouraging the child to think for themselves and to make the right decisions, right? That's one thing. Now, loyalty to language is the second last topic I wanted to address and cover here. That when we speak of loyalty to language, it's more about, let's say, the pride, the legacy, the ego, the enrichment. So when I think of, loyalty to language, I think it becomes more to do with either the pride. So let's say if I am Gujarati, I would preferably speak Gujarati in all places. I don't, I might say that, okay, I don't consider this language, even if it's the most important language at school, or if I supposing move to another country and I see everybody speaking English, I would say I'm not going to speak English. Gujarati is my language. So that superiority and the pride could act like a barrier to that loyalty to language, and it can affect you in multiple ways, negative a lot of times, if that pride is for the wrong reasons. It's okay to be proud of your language, but at the same time, knowing the context and situations, and then using the appropriate language, and what kind of people you're surrounded by, right? Secondly, the legacy. So when it comes to legacy, it could be that, national language is a priority because it's about loyalty to language in terms of legacy of the country, or legacy of the culture, or the family that you belong to, the culture that you belong to. So here again, when we speak of loyalty to language, it's very important that, yes, you love your language, yes, you're very proud of it, but that doesn't mean you have any right to disrespect another language that is not your own, right? So that is very, very important. And to be able to smoothly connect with a person of another language and culture, just like you would with a person of the same language and same culture that you belong to. That is very important as a checkpoint to keep in your head and in your system. The next one is ego, where a person, is egoistic about a certain language that they are using or they are proud of, and therefore, they will taunt and pull down anybody else speaking any other language, and therefore, that acts as a barrier. Because see, if a person is educated, if a person has that level of superiority to think that okay, something is superior in them, they need to figure out and question what exactly is the superiority about. And there is no superiority, that everybody should be thinking they have, because everybody has a different set of talents, different set of strengths and weaknesses, and therefore everybody balances out each other, right? Some people can be more privileged, some people can have more talents and gifts, but at the end of the day, it's all about how you use it, how you invest in it, and how you put in more effort to grow yourself. Enrichment, a lot of times people want to use and have a loyalty to a certain language because they feel it enriches them. It's going to add value to them, they're going to be appreciated in the local scenario, global scenario, if they use it. And maybe there are languages like that, but it's, for me, it's more about loyalty to language, where it's about enriching your life with whatever language you're using, and secondly, enriching people's life. So even if you have to speak a language, I am very interested in learning different languages. So I already know Gujarati, I know Bengali, I know Hindi, I know English. I can read Urdu and Arabic. But yes, I am interested to know Marathi. I am interested to not just know, learn Marathi, learn Tamil, learn Punjabi, learn different languages. Because if I am going to be learning more languages, my mind will develop the ability to think along different lines. Plus, my ability to connect with more people in my country is going to increase because I am that flexible. Because I know that the country I live in, the society around me is so multicultural, it's so multilinguistic, and therefore the more I know of different languages, I'll be able to connect better, I'll be able to have a deeper influence on society, and in the way the society moves ahead, and the human beings progress as a nation, as a global community, or even as the smallest unit of family. And the last bit about social value of language, social value of language, when I think of this phrase, I think about how language is so essential in so there's an economic value, okay? There is something called social value, there is something called political value, there could be like a moral value of something, right? So yes, in language, I do see that there is a moral value of language, there is a economic value to language, there is a social value of language, but it all stems for me from the social value of language. If we understand that language has so much to do with society, society has to do so much with language. If we are able to figure that out and understand the depth at which it actually influences each other, language and society to each other, I think it only helps in taking the business game to another level, to take leadership game to another level, to take the soul enrichment level to another level, right? To the mind enrichment level to another level. And of course then it adds the economic value comes to it because of the using the correct sort of language with different kinds of scenarios and people. Of course the political value comes with it, where if you are a leader and you want to influence the political scenario, the way you use the language, the way you connect with it, it changes the way the political reality and scenario is. And at the same time, the moral value of the language goes higher. People start taking moral seriously because of the way you've connected and used language, and the way different groups interact with each other. So that's all for the sociolinguistics and sociology of language, my understanding and interpretation of these, the two parts. If you've not checked out the first part, go and check it. And yes, looking forward to discussing many more topics on subjects related and topics related to sociolinguistic sociology of language. Thank you so much.